Hi, I'm Thomas Broadhead. I'm the editor of the Critical Performance edition of the Ives Fourth Symphony. In this video, I'm going to talk about my experience with the Berlin Philharmonic, who performed the new edition in September of 2012, 2 weeks after the premiere, which was at the Lucerne Festival. And the Berlin performance was the second performance of the edition. It was given under the baton of Ingo Metzmacher, who has a long history of doing Ives and programming his music and who understands his music well. And he made some interesting and very informed choices about how to present the music, which I want to talk about. Here we're looking at a passage in Ives's own conductor's note to the second movement, the comedy movement of the symphony. And at the top of the page, we're seeing the very end of his note on the collapse section, which, for review, is that passage where the orchestra divides into two groups, an upper orchestra and a lower orchestra. The lower orchestra is playing a treatment of In the Sweet By and By very softly in 3/2 at a steady tempo, while the upper orchestra is playing all this raucous music representing the Celestial Railroad and the Hawthorne story. And it accelerates and gets faster and faster on top of the lower orchestra until it finally collapses. And because of the temporal dyssynchrony, two conductors are conventionally used for the passage. And usually it's the assistant conductor who does the duty of taking care of the upper orchestra, although I've seen some performances where the principal conductor wants to conduct that material and will have the assistant conductor conduct the lower orchestra. But never mind that. What's interesting here is that at the very end of the passage, Ives explains, during this passage, it may be advisable to have one of the players in the upper orchestra act as a separate conductor. Well, Metzmacher read this and understood it and said, let's do it. So he had not the assistant conductor, but the second oboist stand up and conduct the upper orchestra in this passage. Was the second oboist truly free to do that? Well, yes, because the oboes only play in the fourth movement of the symphony. So neither one of them has anything to do during the second movement. So he assigned the conducting of this material to the second oboist. And so this instruction by Ives himself is right there, and it has been acted on, and it was great to see it done. Here we're looking at a page of this full score, and we're at that part of the program and the comedy movement where the train has arrived at Beulahland, and the hymn, Beulahland, is being performed by a solo violin. And prior to the Berlin performance, I'd only ever seen this executed by the concertmaster. But Metzmacher saw this note that's right here in the score, double piano, better at a distance or off stage. And he had one of the violins in the distant choir play the solo. So it fulfilled this, it's not a directive, it's a suggestion that Ives provides. Metzmacher wasn't the only conductor to read this note and take it to heart and pull it off. Thierry Fischer with the Utah Symphony also did it. And so it was also coming from the distant choir when they did it in February of 2017. So twice during my travels, this suggestion by Ives was acted on. The last thing I want to discuss that was done by Metzmacher and the Berlin Philharmonic that was interesting is something that you can actually hear for yourself because their performance was recorded on video and is available via their digital concert hall. And it's that the choir in the fourth movement is not just intoning Nearer My God to Thee, they're singing the lyrics as well. Now, where did that come from? It came not from me, but from a colleague of mine who discovered evidence that Ives intended the lyrics to be sung in the fourth movement. So to understand how that interpretation is possible, we're going to get into the manuscripts just a little bit here. There are two manuscript sources to the fourth movement. There's an initial sketch of the movement, and it has all the basic ideas, but it isn't exactly the same as the movement that we know. Then there is a second fleshed out score sketch. It's almost a fair copy, but not quite. And that's all that Ives left us, and that is the basis for this edition. And the work on that movement was initially done by Wayne Shirley. And in his commentary on the manuscript, he notes an interesting little piece of text that you can find in that second of the two manuscripts that he read to the best of his ability, and his reading of it is presented in the critical commentary. And it was just sort of accepted that this was probably what Ives was saying. But a different Ives scholar, Dorothea Gale, who is a scholar par excellence of the Fourth Symphony, did an entire doctoral dissertation on it and the manuscripts, noticed that it's probably not just random writing. So let's look at first some relevant passages of the first of the two sketches to the fourth movement, and then we'll look at the one that is the basis for the edition. Here we're looking at the sketch towards the fourth movement. And in it, when the chorus enters, Ives writes in ink the lyrics to Nearer My God to Thee, still all my song shall be nearer my God to Thee. It's right there in ink. And then on a page or so later, he's continuing to write out in ink the lyrics, nearer my God to Thee, nearer my God to Thee, nearer to Thee. Okay, well, as I said, this first manuscript isn't really the movement as we know it. It has all the same materials, but it's worked out differently. The version that we know is the second scoring of the movement. It's far more full, first of all. It does have a lot of stuff that's in pencil, but when the chorus comes in, he just marks trumpet and voices, and he does not write in the lyrics. And so when the edition was put together in 1965, there was no attempt at adding lyrics here, and for the present edition, none were added either. Now, here's what's curious. Not when the chorus enters, but a bit later. Right here in an inner voice, there's some interesting text right through here. So this is Wayne's reading of that text. He sees, even throughout a accent, but natural, one, etc., etc. Okay, it's possible, but Doro looked at that and realized that it's actually a section of the hymn text. Remember, the hymn text goes, nearer my God to Thee, nearer to Thee, e'en though it be a cross that raiseth me. And there it is. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, here's the question, though. Did Ives actually intend for the chorus to sing lyrics at the end? We'll never know, because he never made a proper fair copy. All we've got are these two sketches, and the second one is far more worked out than the first, and it's a different beast. And because of that, you really can't mix and match between the two of them. So you sort of choose one of them and use that as the basis for your edition and just work with it. Now, there are orchestrations for small ensemble of songs by Ives, in which Ives penciled out what the corresponding lyrics were in the parent songs above instrumental lines in those orchestrations, so that the instrumentalist might think along with the lyrics he'd originally written. Well, maybe that's what he was intending here, but that would be kind of odd, because to put down a lyric for a singer to think about while intoning something wordlessly is in fact a little odd. But maybe it was a memo that he made just to himself to remind him of what lyric he had in mind for this particular melodic contour that he was writing for one of these inner voices, and that's where it's found. But again, we'll never know, because we don't have a fair copy where he makes this absolutely certain. Well, Doro presented her findings to Metzmacher, and Metzmacher was really excited, and he said, okay, well, let's do this. So she made a Fassung, gave it to him, he gave it to the choral director, and that's what was recorded. You can watch it and listen and consider it on that digital concert hall recording that they made. Now, what do I think about this? It doesn't really work for me. There's a transcendental message running throughout the symphony. And you start with a chorus asking a question at the beginning of the symphony in English. And then you have this journey to the end where you go from this local question to a universal answer. And if music is the universal language, it's by virtue of it not being tied to any one human language, then to apply lyrics in any language to the chorus at the end boxes it in and prevents that universal answer from being provided, for all to hear and to contemplate. So I think it's far more effective for there not to be any lyrics sung by the chorus in the fourth movement. I think, for the transcendental theme to work its way from beginning to end with this universal answer, to the initial question of the symphony, really requires, the absence of any kind of lyrics. But you can listen to the Berlin recording in their digital concert hall and decide for yourself.